Hello, it's Steve Rang again. Today, I want to talk a little bit about your rights as a construction worker to get paid after you are injured on a job. In general, most injuries that occur in a job are not the serious kind that's going to take you a long time to recover from. But there are times when you have a more serious injury and you're going to miss some time from work. And you will be entitled under workers' compensation, assuming the workers' comp is related to the act. There is a time, assuming that the accident is related to your work, that you're going to be able to get monetary, what we call indemnity benefits, for being off work or restricted from returning to work. So it's important to understand when we're talking about this that it is a very long and complex issue, and I'm trying to break it down to its most basic elements. So there's going to be a lot of things I'm not covering, but let's talk about the very basics. Who decides whether or not you're going to get paid other than the insurance company? Well, it's going to be the authorized treating doctor that's authorized by the insurance company. The insurance company, and I mentioned this in prior videos, that the insurance companies are the ones that authorize the doctors on the case. There's few exceptions, but for the most part, the insurance companies authorize the doctor. And in Florida, in workers' comp in Florida, you don't get paid for the first 7 days of your disability if the doctor takes you off work, unless you end up missing 3 weeks. The way it actually works is if you miss 2 weeks, you get paid the second week, and if you miss 3 weeks, you get the first and third week. Don't ask me why it's that way. That's just the way it is. So you have to be a little bit more serious of an injury that you're going to miss some time before you're going to get your full benefit. And this can go on, and you can get your indemnity benefits, whether it be temporary total. Temporary total is when you are completely off work by the authorized doctor, says you can't go back to work, or what's called temporary partial disability benefits. That's when you have restrictions from being able to return to work, and the employer cannot accommodate those restrictions. So these are what's called, when I mention temporary benefits, this is what I mean by temporary benefits. Now there's a cap on the amount of time you get for temporary benefits. It's 260 weeks, but most of the accidents don't go on to 260 weeks. So you're more worried about covering yourself when you're off work. Now, how much do you get? Well, if you're off work, temporary total, you should get 2/3 of what's called your average weekly wage. Your average weekly wage is your average wage for the 13 weeks prior to the accident. Now, I'm not going to talk about what if you don't work the 13 weeks prior to accident, what if there's differences between if you're a seasonal employee, tips, all those other things. I'm just telling you the general information. If you're off work with restrictions, temporary partial, it comes out to about 64%. Or you can even get temporary partial if you return to work if you're not making at least 80% of what your average weekly wage is. I know this can get confusing, but just know those basic rules and it'll be much easier. If you get more complicated, you definitely need to see an attorney when it comes out to it. If it gets maybe a little bit more complicated, you may need to see an attorney. There's other benefits you might be able to get, including permanent total disability. I don't want to get too far into that because that is not something that's available to every worker. It's only if you can't return to really any work, at least sedentary work within a 50-mile radius. It can get very complicated. If you get to that point, you better have an attorney representing your rights. You don't want to do that yourself. So the bottom line is that the authorized treating doctor makes a determination of what benefits you're going to get, whether it be temporary total, temporary partial. Once you reach what's called maximum medical improvement, or MMI, that means the doctor says you're not going to get any better. You may be entitled to what's called impairment benefits, and that is determined by what your impairment rating is. And that's something the doctor determines. And when you get to that point, definitely see an attorney, because invariably the insurance companies don't really calculate that correctly. And I don't want to get into it because it gets so very confusing to explain without sitting down with somebody for probably 10 minutes to explain it. But no, the three basic classifications: temporary total, temporary partial, impairment benefits. If you can't ever return to work, there's permanent total disability. These are things that are determined by the authorized treating doctor. And if you can't get an agreement and they won't pay it, ultimately the judge. So as you can understand, this can be pretty complicated. And if you find yourself in a situation, please feel free to join my Facebook discussion board, the Florida Construction Workers Facebook information group. And I'll be happy to answer any questions you have there, or you can contact me directly at srenick@protectingtheworker.com. I look forward to hearing from you and getting your feedback on what you think.